On January 14, 2016, Celine Dion stood on stage at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. She was about to perform for the first time since her husband René Angélil had died of throat cancer just 2 days earlier. The audience didn't know if she'd actually go through with it. How could she? The man who'd discovered her at 12, who'd believed in her when no one else did, who'd mortgaged his house to fund her first album, who'd become her manager, her husband, the father of her 3 children, he was gone. But Celine walked onto that stage, and she sang. She dedicated the performance to René, her voice breaking with emotion, but never stopping. The audience wept with her. It was one of the most powerful performances of her career. That moment defined who Celine Dion is. A woman who performs through pain, who shows up even when her world is falling apart, who finds strength when there seems to be none left. But what Celine didn't know that night, what she couldn't possibly imagine, was that an even greater battle was waiting for her. A battle that would threaten to take away the one thing that had defined her entire life, her voice. Within a few years of losing René, Celine would be diagnosed with stiff person syndrome, a rare, incurable neurological disorder that causes the muscles to progressively stiffen and spasm. It's often called human statue syndrome because patients can literally freeze in place, unable to move. For a performer whose entire life had been built on movement and singing, this diagnosis was devastating. The disease was slowly freezing her body, making it harder to walk, harder to breathe, and most terrifyingly, harder to sing. By 2023, Celine had been forced to cancel her entire world tour. She couldn't perform, could barely function, was confined largely to her home, doing intense therapy just to maintain basic mobility. But in 2024, Celine did something that shocked the world. She announced she was fighting back. A documentary called I Am Celine Dion would show her battle with this terrible disease. And against all odds, she performed at the Paris Olympics opening ceremony in July 2024, singing from the Eiffel Tower in what many called one of the most emotional performances in Olympic history. So how does a woman survive losing her soulmate to cancer, then face a disease that's literally freezing her body and threatening to end her career? How does she find the strength to keep fighting when everything seems lost? That's the story we're about to tell. The story of Celine Dion's greatest battle. And it starts long before the disease, long before the loss. It starts with a poor girl from Quebec who had a voice that would change everything. This is Celine Dion. If you're enjoying this story of resilience and transformation, don't forget to subscribe to Rise Stories. We bring you the real, untold journeys of the world's most iconic figures, the struggles, the failures, and the comebacks that shaped them. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an inspiring story. Now, let's continue with Celine Dion's incredible journey. Celine Marie Claudette Dion was born on March 30th, 1968, in Charlemagne, Quebec, Canada. She was the youngest of 14 children in a working-class French-Canadian family. 14 children. Imagine that. Her parents, Adhémar and Thérèse Dion, lived in a small house that was constantly bursting with noise, activity, and music. The Dion family was poor, very poor. Adhémar worked as a butcher. Thérèse took care of the enormous household. There was never enough money, never enough space, never enough of anything except love and music. Music was everything to the Dion family. Adhémar played accordion. Thérèse played violin. The children all sang and played various instruments. Their small home was filled with music from morning until night. By the time Celine was 5 years old, she was performing with her siblings at her parents' small piano bar, Le Vieux Baril, the Old Barrel. The family would perform there on weekends, all 14 children taking turns singing. Young Celine was shy and small for her age, but when she sang, something magical happened. Her voice was extraordinary, powerful, emotive, with a range that seemed impossible for such a young child. I was the baby of the family, Celine later recalled. I was spoiled in some ways, but we were also very poor. We wore hand-me-downs, we shared everything. But we had music. That's what made us rich. By the time she was 12, Celine and her mother had written a song together called Ce n'était qu'un rêve. It was only a dream. Thérèse had heard about a music manager named René Angélil who had had some success with other Quebec artists. Thérèse recorded Celine singing the song on a cassette tape and mailed it to René's office. That cassette tape would change everything. When René Angélil received the cassette tape with 12-year-old Celine's voice on it, he was impressed, but skeptical. Child singers were common. Most didn't have staying power, but Thérèse was persistent. She called his office repeatedly, insisting he had to hear Celine sing in person. Finally, René agreed to a meeting. When Celine walked into René's office with her mother, René saw a shy, awkward 12-year-old girl with crooked teeth and an unfashionable appearance. Nothing about her suggested star quality. "Sing for me," René said. Celine was terrified. But when she opened her mouth and began to sing, René was stunned. He'd never heard a voice like this. The power, the control, the emotion. From a 12-year-old. By the time she finished singing, René had tears in his eyes. "I knew right then," René later said. "This girl was going to be a star. Not just in Quebec, not just in Canada. She was going to be a global superstar." But there was a problem. Celine's family had no money to record an album. René believed in her so much that he made an extraordinary decision. He mortgaged his own house to finance Celine's first record. He bet everything on a 12-year-old girl with a remarkable voice. "He risked everything for me," Celine said. "His house, his career, his reputation. If I failed, he would lose it all. But he believed in me that much." René became more than just Celine's manager. He became her mentor, her guide, her father figure. He controlled every aspect of her career, what she sang, how she dressed, how she presented herself. He was grooming her for international stardom, and slowly, Celine was falling in love with him. As Celine moved through her teenage years, her feelings for René deepened. He was 26 years older than her. He'd known her since she was 12. It was inappropriate. It was controversial. They both knew it. René resisted for years. He was her manager. He was old enough to be her father. A romantic relationship would be wrong, potentially career-destroying. But Celine was persistent. "I loved him from the time I was a teenager," she later admitted. "But we didn't start a romantic relationship until I was 19. He made us wait because he knew how it would look." When Celine was 19, their relationship finally became romantic. They kept it secret for years, terrified of public reaction. When they finally went public when Celine was in her early 20s, the response was mixed. Some people were supportive of their love. Others were disgusted, seeing it as a predatory relationship. "People judged us," Celine said. But they didn't know our story. They didn't know that René treated me with complete respect. He never pushed me into anything. He waited until I was an adult. And when we finally got together, it was real love. On December 17, 1994, when Celine was 26 and René was 52, they got married in an elaborate ceremony at Montreal's Notre Dame Basilica. The wedding was broadcast live on Canadian television. For Celine, it was a fairy tale come true. The man who'd believed in her, who'd risked everything for her, who'd guided her to international stardom, he was now her husband. But their journey together would be filled with challenges neither of them anticipated. By the 1990s, Celine Dion had become a global phenomenon. Her powerful voice and emotive performances made her one of the best-selling artists of all time. In 1997, she recorded My Heart Will Go On for the film Titanic. The song became one of the biggest hits in music history, winning the Academy Award and Grammy Award. It solidified Celine as a global superstar. Albums like Falling Into You and Let's Talk About Love sold over 30 million copies each. Her Las Vegas residency at Caesars Palace became one of the most successful concert residencies in history, grossing hundreds of millions of dollars. By the early 2000s, Celine and René had achieved everything they dreamed of: wealth, fame, respect, and most importantly, they had a family. After struggling with fertility issues, Celine gave birth to their son René Charles in 2001. Then, in 2010, after IVF treatments, she gave birth to twin boys, Nelson and Eddie. Celine was at the peak of her career and her personal happiness. She had the man she loved, 3 beautiful sons, and a career that had exceeded even her wildest dreams. But behind the scenes, René was facing a terrifying diagnosis. In 1999, René was diagnosed with throat cancer. He underwent treatment and went into remission. For over a decade, he seemed to be in the clear. But in 2013, the cancer came back. And this time, it was aggressive. René underwent surgery to remove a tumor from his throat. He had radiation treatment, chemotherapy. But the cancer kept spreading. Celine watched the man she loved slowly deteriorating. The strong, confident manager who'd guided her career was becoming weak, frail, unable to eat, barely able to speak. In 2014, Celine made the difficult decision to put her career on indefinite hold to care for René. She canceled tours, turned down opportunities, stepped away from everything to be with her husband. Nothing mattered except being with him, Celine said. My career could wait. René couldn't wait. I wanted every moment I could have with him. For over a year, Celine became René's full-time caregiver. She fed him through a feeding tube. She managed his medications. She held him when the pain became unbearable. Their 3 sons watched their father slowly dying. Celine tried to shield them as much as possible, but there was no hiding the reality. René was losing his battle with cancer. On January 14, 2016, just 2 days before his 74th birthday, René Angélil died at their home in Las Vegas. Celine was 57 years old. The man who'd been in her life since she was 12 was gone. Her manager, her mentor, her husband, the father of her children, her soulmate. She was devastated, lost, didn't know how she'd go on. But she had 3 sons who needed her. And she had commitments, including the Vegas residency that was set to resume just 2 days after René's death. So Celine did what she'd always done. She showed up. She performed. She honored René by doing what he'd trained her to do: give everything to her audience, even when her heart was shattered. The months following René's death were the darkest of Celine's life. She was going through the motions, performing, taking care of her sons, handling business, but inside, she was barely functioning. "I didn't know who I was without René," Celine admitted. "He'd been my manager, my husband, my everything since I was 12 years old. Half my life, he'd been there. And now he was gone." She threw herself into work as a way to cope. The Vegas residency continued. She went on tour. She kept busy because stopping meant facing the grief, and the grief felt insurmountable. But something else was happening. Something Celine didn't understand at first. She was experiencing strange physical symptoms, muscle stiffness that came and went, spasms that would hit her unexpectedly, difficulty with coordination. Sometimes her body would just freeze. At first, she attributed it to stress and grief. She was getting older. She was in her late 50s. Maybe this was just part of aging. Maybe it was the physical toll of years of performing. But the symptoms got worse. Much worse. By 2018, Celine was having serious difficulty performing. Her muscles would spasm uncontrollably during shows. She'd have episodes where her body would seize up and she couldn't move. Walking became difficult. Sometimes she'd lose her balance for no apparent reason. She saw doctor after doctor, neurologists, specialists. They ran tests, MRIs, blood work, muscle biopsies. Finally, in 2022, she got a diagnosis: stiff person syndrome. It's a rare neurological disorder that affects about 1 in a million people. The body's immune system attacks the nervous system, causing progressive muscle stiffness and painful spasms. In severe cases, patients can literally freeze in place, unable to move. There is no cure. The disease is progressive. And for someone whose career depended on movement and physical performance, the diagnosis was devastating. Stiff person syndrome is brutal. The muscles progressively stiffen, particularly in the torso and legs. Spasms can be triggered by noise, touch, or emotional stress. Patients describe feeling like they're being squeezed in a vice. For Celine, the symptoms were terrifying. She'd be walking, and suddenly her legs would lock up. She'd be trying to sing, and her abdominal muscles would spasm, making it impossible to breathe properly. Simple tasks like walking upstairs became dangerous. "There were times when I couldn't walk," Celine revealed in her documentary. "Times when my body would just freeze and I couldn't move at all. I'd fall. I couldn't control my own body. The disease was stealing everything from her. Her mobility, her independence. And most devastating of all, it was threatening her ability to sing. Singing requires precise control of dozens of muscles: the diaphragm, the intercostals, the abdominals, the larynx. Stiff person syndrome was making that control impossible. In December 2022, Celine made the heartbreaking announcement that she was canceling her entire Courage World Tour. She couldn't perform. Her body wouldn't cooperate. For a woman who'd been performing since she was 5 years old, who'd built her entire identity around her voice and her stage presence, this felt like a death sentence. "I was at my lowest point," Celine admitted. "I'd lost René. Now I was losing my ability to sing, to perform, to do the one thing I'd done my entire life. I thought, what's the point? What do I have left?" Some days, she couldn't get out of bed. The pain was excruciating. The spasms were exhausting. The loss of control over her own body was humiliating. But Celine had 3 sons watching her. And she remembered what René had always told her: "You're a fighter. You don't give up." So she didn't. Celine began an aggressive treatment regimen. high doses of muscle relaxants, anti-anxiety medications to reduce spasm triggers, intensive physical therapy, occupational therapy. She worked with specialists from around the world. The treatment was brutal. The medications had severe side effects. The therapy was exhausting and painful. Progress was slow, sometimes non-existent. But Celine kept working, day after day, hour after hour, trying to regain control of her body, trying to strengthen muscles that wanted to freeze, trying to breathe properly, trying to sing again. I would spend 5 hours a day doing therapy, Celine said, stretching, exercising, vocal work. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than any performance, harder than losing René, because it felt impossible. In 2024, Celine made a bold decision. She was going to fight this disease publicly. She would release a documentary showing her battle with stiff person syndrome. She wouldn't hide. She wouldn't pretend everything was fine. I Am Celine Dion premiered in June 2024. It showed everything: the painful spasms, the falls, the frustration, the tears. It showed Celine at her most vulnerable, struggling with basic movements, unable to do the things that used to be effortless. The world watched as Celine had a severe spasm episode during the filming. Her entire body locked up. She couldn't speak, couldn't move, could barely breathe. It took medical intervention to get the spasm under control. It was raw. It was honest. It was heartbreaking. But it was also inspiring, because the documentary showed Celine refusing to give up, fighting through the pain, working tirelessly to regain what the disease had stolen. And then, in July 2024, Celine shocked the world. The 2024 Summer Olympics were being held in Paris. The opening ceremony was set to be spectacular, showcasing the best of French culture and international talent. Rumors started circulating that Celine might perform. People were skeptical. She hadn't performed publicly in over 2 years. She could barely walk. How could she possibly sing at the Olympics? But on July 26, 2024, as the opening ceremony reached its climax, a spotlight illuminated the Eiffel Tower. And there, standing on a platform high above Paris, was Celine Dion. She was wearing a stunning silver gown. The French flag was projected onto the tower behind her. And as the entire world watched, Celine began to sing. She performed Edith Piaf's Hymne à l'amour, Hymn to Love, a song about enduring love, about love that survives even death. Her voice was strong, powerful, emotional. She hit every note perfectly. For 4 minutes, the entire world stopped and listened. When she finished, the roar from the crowd was deafening. Athletes cried. Commentators were speechless. Social media exploded with reactions. It was one of the most emotional performances in Olympic history. Celine had done the impossible. She'd fought through a disease that was trying to freeze her body, and she'd sung on one of the biggest stages in the world. I didn't know if I could do it, Celine later admitted. Right up until the moment I started singing, I didn't know if my body would cooperate. But I had to try. For René, for my sons, for everyone who's fighting their own battle, I had to show that you don't give up. As of late 2024, Celine continues to battle stiff person syndrome. She has good days and bad days. Days when she can move relatively normally, and days when her body freezes and she can barely function. She's still in intensive therapy, still taking medications, still fighting for every bit of progress. The question everyone asks, will she perform again? Will she tour again? Celine's answer is always the same. I'm fighting to get back on stage. I don't know if it will happen, but I'm going to try. She's 66 years old now. She's lost her husband. She's battling a disease that's trying to steal her mobility and her voice. But she's still fighting. Her 3 sons, René Charles, now 23, and the twins Nelson and Eddie, now 14, are her motivation. They're watching their mother refuse to give up, refuse to let a disease define her. I want my sons to know that no matter what life throws at you, you keep fighting, Celine said. You don't give up. You find a way. Today, Celine Dion's net worth is estimated at around $800 million. She's sold over 250 million albums worldwide, making her one of the best-selling artists of all time. She's won 5 Grammy Awards, including Album of the Year. She has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. But none of those accomplishments define her legacy as much as what she's doing right now. Fighting, surviving, refusing to let a disease win. What can we learn from Celine Dion's journey? Love doesn't always look conventional. Celine and René's relationship was controversial, but it was also real, lasting, and filled with genuine love and respect. 21 years of marriage proved their connection was authentic. Grief doesn't end, but you learn to carry it. Celine didn't get over losing René. She learned to live with the loss, to honor him by continuing, to find meaning in the life they built together. Your body may fail, but your spirit doesn't have to. Stiff person syndrome is taking Celine's physical abilities, but it hasn't taken her determination, her will, her refusal to give up. Vulnerability is strength. By showing her struggle publicly, Celine helped countless people dealing with chronic illness feel less alone. Her honesty gave others permission to admit when they're struggling. It's never too late to fight back. At 66, battling a progressive disease, Celine is still working toward a comeback. Age, any illness don't mean you stop trying. Your legacy is how you handle adversity. Celine will be remembered for her voice, yes, but she'll also be remembered for singing 2 days after her husband died, or performing at the Olympics despite a disease that was trying to freeze her body, or refusing to give up. In November 2024, Celine gave a rare interview. She talked about her ongoing battle with stiff person syndrome, about missing performing, about the daily struggle to maintain mobility. But she also talked about hope, about the possibility of finding better treatments, about her dream of performing a full concert again. I don't know if it will happen, she said, but I'm going to keep fighting for it. Because that's who I am. That's what René taught me. You never give up on your dreams. From a poor girl from Charlemagne, Quebec, one of 14 children, to one of the most successful artists in history. From a 12-year-old with a cassette tape to a global icon. From losing her soulmate to fighting a disease that's trying to freeze her body. Through it all, Celine Dion has shown us what true strength looks like. It's not about never falling. It's about getting back up, even when your body won't cooperate. It's about singing through grief. It's about fighting, even when the outcome is uncertain. Her story isn't over. The disease continues. The battle continues. But so does Celine. Because that's what fighters do. They keep going. So what's your story? What's your battle? What's trying to freeze you in place? To silence your voice? To stop you from being who you're meant to be? Remember Celine. Remember that she lost everything and kept singing. Remember that she's fighting a disease that's trying to steal her body, and she's not giving up. If she can fight, so can you. Your story isn't over. Keep singing.